hopefully this series is for everybody. It's for parents, no matter what stage of life your kids are in. This is for grandparents. This is for uncles and aunts. This is for people who has influence in kids' lives. And so really, I think there's something that we can all learn from this. But today, I want to start with this idea of family of origin and why it matters. We all have a family of origin. It just simply means the family in which you were raised, the influences that were there, the experiences you had, the values that were instilled into you, all of those things made up your family of origin. Now, if your family of origin was healthy, it will be easier for you to make slight adjustments along the way in your own behavior, in your own parenting, to help you thrive maybe in ways that your own family of origin did not. If your family of origin was very unhealthy, it can be very complicated and actually take a lot of time and a lot of work to understand what that brokenness was, how it impacted your life, how it impacts your parenting, how it impacts your own family, your own kids. And here's the temptation that some parents fall into, that they try to swing the pendulum as far as they can to the other side if they had a really unhealthy experience. To say, I'm gonna do absolutely everything the opposite. I'm not even giving much thought to this. I'm just gonna swing that pendulum as far as it will go. And unbeknownst to us, sometimes we can create unhealth just in the opposite ways. And why it's so important for us to discuss this and what it means to have a healthy family of origin and why it matters and why it starts with us. Because here's something that we all know, whether or not you've thought about it in these terms or not, here's the truth about your relationship with your mom and dad, and it's your first fill-in. That your parents' behavior, not their advice, determined whether or not you liked them or wanted to be with them. Your parents' behavior, not their advice, determined whether or not you liked them or wanted to be with them. Isn't that true? Right? I mean, for you growing up, once you were free to decide for yourself where you were gonna spend your time and who you were gonna take advice from, your parents' behavior dictated a lot of this for you. It wasn't their advice, it wasn't necessarily their parenting skills, but what determined the substance of your relationship was their behavior towards you and your relationship with them. So chances are, your behavior now as parents, not your advice, will determine whether or not your kids will like you and want to be with you and accept your advice long after they no longer need to. It's really important. In the same vein, your next fill-in, your parents' behavior determined how much respect you had or have for them. Isn't that true? Your parents' behavior, not their great advice, their behavior determined how much respect you had or continue to have for them to this day. And you already know this, that it's respect that creates influence, right? If there's no respect, there's no influence. And if the history of humanity repeats itself, which we believe it will, the same will be true of you and your kids, you and your grandkids. So what are we to do with that? What do we do? Well, I think it's important that we realize what's at the core ethic of following Jesus, because it actually helps us in our parenting. And it's this, your next fill-in, that at the core of being a follower of Jesus is an ethic of putting others first. It's really an ethic of selflessness. That's at the core of following Jesus, a love for others, putting them first, and it's an ethic of selflessness. The Jesus ethic says this, that I will not do anything for you if it's not good for you because I love you. I will not do anything for you if it's not good for you because I love you. And if you want to discover what surfaces your own selfishness more than anything, just try having a child and raising that child, especially when they come out of the womb screaming, me first, right? And if you don't do what I want you to do, I'm gonna make your life pretty miserable. It will stir up quite a bit in us as parents. And suddenly what begins, and we know all this too well, is the clash of wills. The clash of wills begin, and if we aren't careful, and it's what we're going to talk about today, if we aren't careful, it has the potential to bring out the worst in us. It has the potential to bring out the worst side of us. Fear, insecurity, rashness, anger, really the ugly side of us, because we want to establish our will. And the reason why this is so important that we examine this and that we talk about it, that we discover it, is because whether we realize it or not, each one of us as parents are creating right now our own family of origin. We're creating right now our own family of origin that one day our kids will look back upon in health or unhealth to determine what we did and how it impacted their life. And so it's so important that we examine these truths to say, how do we look at our family of origin? Because I think all of us, there's not a parent in the room, there's not a grandparent in the room that would like to get this wrong. All of us want to get this thing right. And so along with this Jesus ethic, this idea of putting others first, right? This ethic of selflessness that Jesus taught us, Paul comes along and gives us guardrails to keep us loving others, including our kids, like Jesus wants us to love each other. And Paul's message was this, is that here is how love looks like in your relationships. Here is how love looks like in your family. Here's how love looks like when it's under pressure. And as parents, we find ourselves under pressure quite a bit, don't we? Right? Again, we said it's one of the toughest jobs in the world. And so this morning, in the few moments that we have together, I want to examine this passage in 1 Corinthians 13 that talks about love. It simply describes what love is. Now, if you've been around church for a little bit, or maybe you've been to a wedding before and the pastor brought out 1 Corinthians 13 and we're going to talk about love, we oftentimes think that this is only about marriage, and it's not. This is a passage about how love works in our relationships. It's a love passage. And so this morning, I want us to put on the lens of parenting to look at these verses through that lens of how we raise our kids. And so we pick it up in 1 Corinthians 13. If you have your Bibles, you can turn there, or you can follow along right on the screen. But 1 Corinthians 13:4, Paul starts this way. Love is, let's all say it together. That's right. I mean, why did he have to start here? I mean, how did he know? How did he know? Love is patient. Early on in our marriage, when we had little babies, and I'm working and doing all that, Tara would say from time to time, hey, there's something that I got to do, and I need you to be home, and you are taking care of the kids. And so I would say, or later in the discussion, I would say something to the effect of, okay, so which night is it that you need me to babysit? And then I would just get the look. Have you ever had the look? And she would say to me, you are not babysitting our children. You are parenting our children, right? And I learned real quickly only to make that mistake about 5 or 6 times. And then I learned my lesson after that. We're parenting, right? But I like a busy pace, and I've got a lot going on. And sometimes with a baby, everything just seems so slow. Like everything just comes to a screeching halt with kids sometimes. And you think, goodness, couldn't I spend my time better? Couldn't I be more productive if I did X, Y, or Z? But Paul is trying to teach us that love is patient, that love slows down to your kid's pace, that love takes the back seat, right? Your own agenda takes the back seat when love is involved. I mean, just yesterday, Pax and I were at his basketball thing, and we were trying to get through the cold and get in the car, and I wanted him to buckle up, and I wasn't gonna move until he buckled up, and he had 1,000 questions, and I said, will you buckle up, will you buckle up? And by the 4th time, I'm like yelling at him, will you sit down and buckle up, right? And then I realized after I yelled, I'm like, I'm talking on patience tomorrow. What am I doing, right? Right, so love slows down to their pace. Love is patient. It's what love requires. And here's, right, when we have that patience with them, what does it do? It draws them towards us. When we're impatient with them, it pushes them away. And this is what love does. Love instructs us to be patient. And I am so grateful that God was patient with us, that God moves at our own pace, that God accepts us right where we're at, that he loves us right where we're at. It's so important. And in the same vein, Paul actually gives specific instructions to fathers, and I believe it's for all parents about their kids when he writes this in Colossians 3:21. He says, "Fathers, do not exasperate your children." Don't exasperate them. In other words, don't provoke your kids. Don't stir them up. Don't frustrate them. Don't insist on winning. Don't try to outsmart them and outtalk them or push too hard or move too fast. Or else what will happen? Paul finishes his sentence. Do not exasperate your children, or they will become discouraged. They will become discouraged. They'll become disheartened, and they will lose motivation. And they will stop because they feel like they can't measure up to whatever it is you want from them. And when they don't feel like they measure up, what do naturally? They begin to pull away and pull out of relationship with you. And it's the exact opposite of what we want as parents, right? We want our kids to keep leaning in. And so Paul says, don't exasperate them. And I can tell you, after 11 years of youth ministry and after 11 years of leading this church, I know lots and lots of parents who have little to no relationship with their adult children because they exasperated them when they were kids. Their kids never felt like they could measure up. They felt like their parents were always disappointed in them. They pushed them to be what they wanted them to be or what they wanted them to do. Right? The expectations that were so high. And Paul says, love doesn't exasperate. Love is patient. Love slows down enough to move at their pace. And then he continues in verse 4. He says, love is, let's say it together. Love is kind. Love is kind. And here's how I want to define kindness in light of parenting, and this is your next fill-in. That kindness is loaning our kids our strength rather than reminding them of their weakness. Kindness is loaning our kids our strength rather than reminding them of their weakness. Our kindness gives them their strength when they can't hold it all together. Because never before has a generation of kids had so much heavy, emotional, and stressful things thrown at them by our culture. Never before in the history of humanity. And at times that pressure is gonna let out somewhere. And are we gonna be the type of parents that loan them our strength when they're in the middle of their weakness? Or will we be ones to remind them of their weakness? To remind them that they're not there yet, that they don't measure up yet. Why can't they handle this or that? Love requires kindness from us to loan them our strength when they find themselves in place of weaknesses. And then Paul continues in verse 4, love does not envy, it does not boast, and it is not proud. Doesn't envy, doesn't boast, is not proud. Love says, you first. Love lowers our pride. Right? Our parenting isn't ego-driven or trying to level up and say, I've got one over you. No, actually, love causes us to level down, to operate in humility, to model servanthood for them. Right? We're not saying just because I'm the parent, I'm leveling up. No, I'm not gonna envy, I'm not gonna boast, I'm not gonna let pride rule in my parenting. And then a real big one in verse 5. Paul continues, love does not dishonor others. Love does not dishonor others. And I wanna say something here that I think is really important, but you might disagree with me momentarily, right? So before you walk out, just let me explain myself. Will you let me do that? And here it is, that I would argue, your next fill-in, that honor in your home is a better goal than obedience. That honor is a better goal in your home than obedience. And I understand Ephesians 6:1, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. It goes on to say, honor your father and your mother, that your days on the earth might be long and they might be well. Right? This idea of obedience and honor, they're there. But I would argue that honor is a better goal than obedience. And here's why. Honor and respect are at the heart of every mutually healthy relationship. There's honor and respect. And obedience just answers this question. How low can I go? Mom and Dad, just show me where the line is, and I'll make sure that I try once in a while to stay under that line. Right, I'm gonna flirt with it, I'm gonna push against it, but really it's a question of how low is your bar and how low is your line? What can I get away with? Honor, on the other hand, pushes us to go higher than obedience. Now, don't get me wrong, I like obedience. I want my children to be obedient, right? We all want our children to behave. But don't we want something more than perfectly behaved children? I think that answer is yes. Because here's the truth, right? I mean, Tara and I, we're in the trenches with you. We have 4 kids, ages 7 to 16. I mean, we are in the trenches with you. But my goal through their life is not to maintain control. My goal is to maintain influence all of their life. And if my goal is to remain in control, then obedience and setting the mark is going to be the only thing I strive for. But if I want to retain influence in their life, honor is going to take its place. I want my kids, and in fact, we're going to do a deep dive on that next week on how you maintain influence and not control, so please don't miss that. But the truth is, I want my kids to honor their parents. I want them to honor God. I want them to honor others. I want them to honor each other. Because it instills a heart in them that says, how high can I go, instead of just meeting the benchmark of obedience? Right, when you have mutual honor and respect in a relationship, you don't want to do anything to hurt the other person. And so you're going to take the rule of obedience and you're actually going to surpass it with the heart of honor. To say, I know my parents said this, gosh, and maybe that's close, but I really want to honor my mom and dad, and so I'm not even going to go near that. I'm going to honor God in this way. I'm going to honor my friends. I'm going to honor my teachers. I'm going to honor those in authority. Honor, in my mind, is a much better goal than obedience. But here's the truth, and we all know this, that honor is more caught than taught. Honor is caught in your home as you choose to honor one another, as you model this for your kids. As you honor them, they honor you. As you honor your spouse honors you. As they see you honoring authority, as they see you honoring your boss, as they see you honoring your neighbors, this spirit of influence remains because honor has been the goal. And it hasn't been taught to them, right? We're not sitting down and say, here's the 4 lessons on honor. No. It's something that is caught by how we live our lives. And part of our goal in parenting is to model this for them, to show them honor and not dishonor. That's why Paul said love doesn't dishonor one another. We model it for them and for others, for them to catch. Verse 5, Paul continues, love is not self-seeking. Love is not self-seeking, which simply means that love isn't selfish. It puts the needs of interest of those around you in front of you. And the truth is that if we just applied this one thing to every relationship, it would solve most of our relationship problems. If we just put the other person ahead of ourselves. But Paul is about to connect really 2 things together here. And he connects the dots in relationship and how these 2 things really go together. It's not just about being selfless, right? And not self-seeking. But in the context of parenting, as we understand this next part of it, verse 5, that love is not easily angered. Love is not self-seeking, and love is not easily angered. And don't miss this. This is really important. This Greek word for angered here is actually this word stir. It's actually a cooking term, like you were stirring a pot or you're stirring something. And it's translated in other places, this word angered, as stir. Do your kids ever get you stirred up? This morning? Did your kids stir you up? Years ago, we used to buy this natural peanut butter because we were trying to be all organic and, hey, let's go. And so we'd buy the natural peanut butter, where it's got the peanuts on the bottom and like the peanut butter paste in the middle, and then inevitably an inch or 2 of oil right on top. And we went through this for months, and I hated it because every time I peeled the lid off that thing, it was so hard to get off, but by the time I was able to pull it off, oil spilt all over my hands, all over the side of the jar, all over the counter, right? And then I'd get out the knife, and then I would try to dig through, and I swear, like an hour later, I'm still trying to mix this peanut butter into place. I'm trying to get the peanuts up and get the oil down, and it's all this thing. And by the time I'm done, like, it's a workout. Right? And we have moved away from natural peanut butter just because I don't have the time or energy in my day to deal with that right now, right? I'm raising kids, man. I can't deal with natural peanut butter. But what's interesting about that natural peanut butter is that as you're doing that, you're just stirring it. You didn't create anything. You didn't add anything to it. You didn't add anything new to the mix. We're just surfacing what was already there to begin with. And some of you are already ahead of me. And I know it's something that none of us really want to hear. And I'm going to say this from personal experience. Your next fill-in. Our kids don't make us angry. Our kids just stir up or bring to the surface what's already in us. Our kids don't make us angry. Our kids just stir up or bring to the surface what is already in us. And they do it better than anybody else, don't they? They know how to push our buttons. They know how to stir it up. And maybe it's in some of those moments that we finally understand the frustration of our own mom and dad. Do you ever find yourself in those moments and go, oh yeah, so this is what I did to my parents. Okay, that's great. But much like that peanut butter, what is it in us that they're so good at bringing to the surface? What's already down deep? What are the things in us where we're not getting our way? And Paul says love is not self-seeking. Right? Just when I yelled at my youngest yesterday to get in the car and hurry up, right? Here I'm violating, I'm patience, going at his pace instead of mine, right? And I'm not getting what I want because I want to leave. And he wants to ask me some questions. He doesn't want to buckle up. He wants to talk to me. And I'm getting mad at him, right? Well, I was self-seeking. Easily angered, right? And then we yell something because we're angry. I mean, let's be honest. We want things to go our way as parents, don't we? And when things don't go our way, we get stirred up. And parenting, it's emotional, isn't it? It's emotional because we're human. It's emotional because we care. And it's also emotional because we are selfish. There are times that what we want is overriding our own emotions, and our anger turns into actions and words. And I got to tell you, if we don't get anything right, we got to work on this. We got to get this one right because our words weigh so much. Our words weigh so much. In fact, if I were to ask you, what was your deepest hurt from your mom and dad? Chances are it wasn't something they did, it was something they said. And so your next fill-in, when we allow our emotions to take over our mouths, we talk to and react to our children as if they have the context and capacity of an adult, and they have neither. When we allow our emotions to take over, right? Take over our mouths. We tend to talk to our kids as if they have the context and capacity of an adult, and they have neither. And worse for most of us, let's have an honest moment. Most of us wouldn't dare talk to some of our coworkers the way we talk to our kids. We wouldn't talk to our friends the way that we talk to our kids. And if we were to talk to our kids that way, or our friends that way, or our coworkers that way, guess what? They have the capacity as an adult to go, what's wrong with him? What's her problem? Right? Those that are around us, they're wise enough to process and think, what's wrong with you? Our kids, on the other hand, they process our anger as what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? See, love is requiring us to not be easily angered, but to grow in patience with our kids. To recognize the phase of development they're in, to recognize that they might be having a bad day. I mean, good grief. We have bad days on the regular, don't we? And we easily excuse our bad days because we know why we're having a bad day. Do we ever allow our kids to have a bad day? Or to have an emotional day? Right? The truth of all of this that Paul's really trying to get us to understand is that when love is not self-seeking, it will not be easily angered. When love is not self-seeking, it will not be easily angered. And that's the goal. And Paul isn't done. Are you still with me? Say yes. Okay, Paul isn't done. I know it's a lot. I know it's heavy. Verse 5, love keeps no record of wrongs. Love keeps no record of wrongs. When I was 9 years old, I had 3 brothers, and there were a bunch of jerk faces that lived behind us. And they were always bugging us, and their kids picked on us, and one day we were like, we've had it. And so we snuck out one night, crack of midnight, raided our parents' fridge for all the eggs they had. And we snuck around a couple of houses so no one could see us, and we went to the front of their house, and we egged the front of their house, and then we ran like scared little chickens. Now, this is before the day of Ring doorbells and video cameras in every corner of everybody's house. But somehow, the next day, they knew it was us and our parents knew it was us. And we got busted big time. And we had to go over to their house and we had to scrub egg off of their screens. Have you ever tried to scrub egg off a screen? No bueno. I mean, it is no fun, right? Washing down their door, washing down everything, and then we had to apologize to them. You know what my parents didn't do to their credit? They punished us. We got in trouble. But a month later, we didn't hear about it again. 2 months later, they didn't bring it up when they were angry with us. The year mark didn't come and it was like celebration of when you got in trouble for egging that house. Like there was none of that. And what they were doing, maybe without even realizing, is they were modeling this whole idea that love keeps no record of wrongs. And I got to tell you, this is hard to do because as parents, our memories are good when we're mad, aren't they? And so here's what I would say about this, your next fill-in. Forgiving and pretending to forget will always be your best bet. Forgiving and pretending to forget will always be your best bet. It will. I'm so grateful that God does that for us. That he forgives our sin and he chooses never to remember it again. How grace-filled is that? And when you hear that kind of message, what does that make you want to do? Lean into that kind of relationship, doesn't it? Forgiving and pretending to forget will always be our best bet as parents. And why is this important? Because remember, you're creating your own family of origin. And you want to retain influence with your kids all their lives. You want them to be with you and hang out with you when they don't have to. You want them to ask your advice when they could ask it from a million other people. And this is part of it. Forgiving and forgetting. And then verse 6, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. And here's your fill-in on this, that love loves to catch and celebrate people doing the right thing. Love loves to catch people and celebrate them doing the right thing. Right? Love doesn't feel a sense of victory when you've caught your kid doing something wrong. Right? I've had plenty of those moments where, I've got them this time, and that's normal, but it's not love. Rather, love instructs us to call out the things they're doing right, the choices they are making that was right, and we're praising that, we're rewarding that, right? What you reward gets repeated. We enter into that space. We remind them again of how proud we are of this decision or that decision. Because oftentimes, right, we set the bar of expectation, and even when they meet it, we rarely praise them. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Right? I'm not trying to prove I'm right. Love isn't reminding everyone, especially of our kids, of their past failures. Rejoice with them on what they're doing right. Call those things out. Tell them over and over again. And then Paul finishes with this, verse 7, love always protects. Love always protects. Love always defends. Love always stands guard. Love keeps bad things out. And I got to tell you, that's harder and harder to do the older your kids get, especially in the 21st century. And so 2 weeks from today, we're going to do a deep dive on boundaries and how we do that, how we help the kids with devices and phones and internet and all of those kind of things. We're going to get into that. But love protects. Love as parents is one of our most important things that we can do, is to establish the fence around our kids' lives. I'm not talking about being a helicopter parent. I'm talking about setting up the kind of boundaries that are going to save them from others and even at times themselves. That's what love does. And then Paul ends with this phrase, love never fails. Love never fails. And the truth is, as we wrap this up, is that there's no perfect kids. And in fact, I don't even think we'd want perfect kids, because our perfect kids would have a kind of a bummer of a time hanging out with imperfect parents. Isn't that true? Right? None of us have it all together. None of us can be all of these things all of the time. It's our aim and it's our goal. And I'm so grateful that our Heavenly Father gave us a model to live by that can mold and shape our own family of origin through the lens and love of Jesus. And this is why anchoring our parenting to Jesus' all-encompassing command to love one another is so important, because it instructs and informs our behavior as parents. It's important because we don't want the kind of goals that just says, I'm not going to have the same relationship with my daughter that my mom had with me. We don't just want the kind of goal to say, I'm never going to be like my parents, and I'm just going to swing the pendulum all the way around. Or I'm never going to be like my dad, or I'm never going to be like my mom. Those are terrible goals. Those goals aren't inspiring, and they certainly aren't relational. Instead, we want to aim for future influence and healthy relationships. Future influence and healthy relationships. So as we close, I want to give you a list of practical ways to do this. Practical ways to earn their respect, to keep their respect, to keep this level of honor going between you. And every week in this series, at the end, I'm just going to give you a list of really, really practical things that we can work on together. And so I'm just going to fire through these. Ready? Here we go. It's right on your notes. Grow in patience. Right? Deep breath, be nourishing and encouraging. Go at their pace, not yours. Second thing, don't use manipulation or sarcasm. And I've seen this a lot, where parents, especially when they're angry, they use a lot of sarcasm really harshly. And I would say, don't use sarcasm ever with your kids in a mean way, ever. Speak from your heart exactly what you mean. Next, pick your battles, because not every hill is worth dying on. Stop exasperating your kids. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill. Pick your battles wisely. Next, remind them often that you are for them. Over and over and over again, remind them that you are with them and that you're for them. Next, say, I'm sorry, and admit wrongdoing. Right? This opens their heart to you. And this is one of the hardest things to do as a parent, right? You go to your kids and say, hey, I'm really sorry, I blew it. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have acted like that. I shouldn't have raised my voice. I'm sorry, will you forgive me? But every time you do that, you know what it does? It opens your kid's heart to you. And it models for them what humility looks like. And without even teaching them, it tells them there's gonna be plenty of times in their life that they're gonna have to go to someone and apologize and make it right. We model that. Next, be a better listener than you are talker. Take it in, pray about it. Every time your kid wants to talk, listen. Every time your kid is interrupting you, stop and just listen, because there's gonna come a day that they don't interrupt you anymore. Soak it in as long as you can. Pray about everything they're going through. Next, focus on your relationship, not your agenda, because they're smart enough to see right through that. Right? Focus on the relationship you're building with them. And then lastly, be a safe place for them to lean. Don't overreact to things. Learn from mistakes, and we're gonna talk more about that when we talk about boundaries and how we do all that, but to be a safe place for them to lean. And again, here's why all this is important. Remember how your parents' behavior determined whether or not you liked them or wanted to be around them. Your parents' behavior determined whether or not you have respect for them today or you don't. And the same will be true of your kids. And it's never too late. Even if your kids are grown, it's never too late to mold and shape that relationship, to model a new way for them. And as preparing this week, I wanted to show you some pictures to close this thing out. And maybe you've seen pictures like this where a tree has basically had to grow around a different item. And as a result, you can just keep flying through these. As a result, these trees are disfigured, right? Because they've had to grow around the railing or grow through the piano or grow through the tombstone. And as I was thinking about these pictures, this thought came to my mind, that I don't want my kids to have to grow around my issues. And as a result, become disfigured in their family of origin. I want to humbly come to God and say, God, what are the things that tend to be stirred up in me that I haven't dealt with? What are the areas that I need to grow in? Because just like you, I want to be the best dad that I can be, the best parent that I can be. And I think it's all of our goals to submit to the way of love that Jesus gives us. And I encourage you, take these notes, put it somewhere, put it on your fridge, look at it all week. Am I loving in these ways? And as we focus our aim there, you know what it helps us do? It will help us to create the family of origin we've always wanted. And we do it because your family matters. Right? It's not just a TV show. Your family matters. So can we pray together? Do you mind just closing your eyes? All over this room, even if you're watching online, would you just close your eyes? As we just take a moment to bring our parenting and all of its humanity before God. The strengths, the weaknesses, the areas we've done well, the areas we've failed miserably. God, we're bringing it all to you. And we're asking you this question, God, in this moment. What is it that you want to do in me so that right now I can create a healthy family of origin? So let's ask that question right now and listen. Let him speak to our hearts just for a moment. So Heavenly Father, we're listening. And we know that we all need to put some things into practice. I'm grateful for the way that you've modeled this for us, the way you've loved us and met us right where we're at. Help us to do the same for our kids. And God, we know that none of us could be all these things all the time. And so would you, by your Spirit and your grace, help us to live this out to the best of our ability. That you would help us to retain influence with our kids for their entire lives. And we know it will happen as we love and model this for them. So would you help us in the areas that we fail? Would you help us to be quick to apologize, to make things right? To do in us, God, what we seem to not be able to do ourselves at times. So that's why we lean on you. We thank you that you're a God of hope, that you tell us that you're always with us, even in this parenting journey or grandparenting journey. God, you're with us. And you invite us to talk to you all the time. You invite us to receive wisdom from you and guidance. And so God, I thank you that you are speaking to our hearts, that you're walking with us in this challenging, challenging time called parenting. Thank you. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen.